You guys have come to Umzumbi Bible Institute, and I think that a reasonable question is, why is there a facility here? Um, why is it here instead of somewhere else? And how did this develop as a facility? So, I think that I should just explain to you how it all came about, and basically I can call this the rise and fall of Umzumbi Bible Institute because both things have happened here. The reason that there is any kind of school here of the Church of Christ in South Africa is because missionaries came to South Africa back in the early 50s, and they felt that the ministers that they were working with and the people generally that they were working with were uneducated, and they were often extremely ignorant of what the Bible taught. And so first Max Randall and then my dad did some teaching. In fact, my dad's purpose in coming out here in 1953 was in order to open a school, to formalize the training that they were doing, to provide a formal school for instructing church leaders. And so that started in Kimberley. And even by 1958, the government was already making it clear at that time, because those were the heydays of apartheid. They were making it clear that they would not give us permission to bring black people into Kimberley, because Kimberley was a designated white community. And so they suggested that we move the school if we wanted to continue to function. And they actually gave us some instructions with regard to this as well. They said that we had to move to a place where we had a strong representation of the church, which actually Kimberley was the center of an area where that was true even then. But then they also insisted that the property had to qualify under apartheid, which meant that where the teachers or missionaries taught, it could be on white land that was designated for whites, and where the students lived and where any African teachers lived had to be on black land. And so this fence line, which you people have walked up and down along who knows how many times, that actually was a boundary between what was designated white land and what was designated black land. And the same is true of the boundary over on the fence on that side. And so the first building that was built, which was a church building up here, that was where teaching took place. Actually, students lived there as well, because that was the only building on the property at that time. But anyway, it was on white land. And then when the dormitory was built, which is this rubble now over on this side, across the fence, there's ruins of a building over there. That was the first dormitory, and that was built on black land. Now, even by the early 1960s, the government was not enforcing that anymore. And so, as you can see, all of the buildings after that were built on this property, except Nick Kromesh's house. But then Nick Kromesh, who is a teacher here, he bought this 5-acre plot of land over here where you can see sugarcane now. But when my dad went to look for property, and he and Alvin Nicholson, whom the Americans anyway should all know, they went looking for property together. They looked at 3. One of the properties I don't ever remember visiting, but one of them was out at Arabi, just beyond where you guys stayed out there. And the government wasn't happy with that, because they were afraid that we, instead of holding to what we had said, that we would be teaching Christian leaders, that we might just go into farming, because it was a viable farm. And so they weren't happy with that one. The other one they vetoed completely. They just said that it wouldn't work, and I think that was a bit closer to Durban. And then this one they said that they would approve, and if we chose this property and built according to their specifications, they would not interfere in the school. So if you want to know why is the school here at this particular place, that's why. At the time, we were not given much option in what we could do, and still have government approval for and recognition for the school. And I think that I should just explain a little bit about the teaching as well. In the beginning, especially when the school was in Kimberley, the ministers came for one 10-week term, and that was their period of study. They returned home and started ministering. some of them eventually came back for a second 10-week term, and so they got a little bit more education. But it really wasn't until about 1960, the time that the school moved down here, that students started staying regularly for 1 year. And then by the time I came out here in 1971, some of the students were staying on for a second year as well. And that was all of the formal Bible training that these ministers had. So, you know, when you think of Jim Connor having a PhD, it wasn't quite that way in this situation here. The school continued to function into the 90s, but by then we were undergoing the throes of a revolution here in South Africa, and the freedom struggle was in full swing, and of course that had an impact on our school. There were times when we could see smoke from burning huts over on this side from the school, and by 1992, I think it was, I should have checked on some dates here, but anyway, there were quite severe problems in this area. At one stage, the ANC Youth League organized demonstrations here in this area, and it was basically commandeering other people to join the ANC,
What is the
the African National Congress. And the two major political parties in this area are the African National Congress and the Inkatha Freedom Party. And there was quite a severe conflict between them. But they gathered right down here one Saturday morning and threatened to burn our school down if the students didn't join the ANC. Well, join their march, which effectively meant joining the ANC. And in the end, our students refused, and they did not burn down the school. Somebody within their own ranks stopped them, and I don't know who it was. But the result was that the school didn't get burned down at that stage. But we were in, you know, just a severe political situation at that time. And it was after that this school closed for the first time. Now, other high schools in the area had closed off and on for over a year by that stage. But that was the first time that the Mzumbi Bible Institute had to close because of the political violence that was going on in this area. We continued to hold Bible classes here. We continued to teach until 1993. And of course, by that stage, virtually every leader within the Restoration movement in the Church of Christ had received some or all of his training at this school. But in 1993, I went to teach one of my classes. It's the classroom that the boys are in up there, on a Monday morning, and one of the students told me that morning that I wasn't going to teach. And at first I just thought it was a, you know, not a joke, but I mean not something serious. And I just told him that I was going to teach. And I told him that he didn't have the authority to tell me that I couldn't teach. And when I looked up at him, I realized, because then he said again, you are not going to, in fact he called me by my first name, which the students normally didn't do. And he said, Michael, you are not going to teach today. And I looked up at him and I realized that this was a much more serious issue than I had thought that it was. And he then walked over, I told him to go and sit in his seat, and he refused. And then he walked over to another desk in the room, and he picked out a blade, it's a brass whip that he had sharpened. And he started walking to the front of the class. The other students walked out, and so I was left with him, and I decided, you know, that my die was already cast, so I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of running away. And anyway, he came up, swung the knife at me, but instead of chopping off my head, which was what I expected at that stage, he just hit me with the flat side of the blade. And continued to do so until finally I decided I might as well get up and walk out of the classroom. It wasn't going to change what happened to me, evidently. And so I walked out. The other teacher met me at the corner of the classroom there, and then he tried to reason with the student who had done this. But in the end, the student actually walked away with the weapon still in his hand. He wouldn't put it down. And that put um, into play a series of events that resulted in the closing of the school. The only way that in the end the school committee could resolve the issue was if I resigned from the school, and I won't explain all the details to you, but that was just, the way that things worked out. So I agreed that I would resign from the school. The student would have to leave, and the school would continue under different leadership then. Yeah.
Why was it that you said you couldn't teach there?
Something that I had done the previous week had angered him. And I had meetings over the weekend, so I hadn't paid any attention to him. And I think that just angered him even more, to the point where he felt that I had insulted him. And insult, you have to understand, in a much more serious context than Americans would normally think of it. The easiest way that I can explain it to you is to use the old concept of tossing down the gauntlet to start a duel. That was the way that he felt about what I had done. And because I had ignored him over the weekend, that just showed that I really was, shall we say, effectively throwing down the gauntlet. In fact, one of the statements that he made to me after we got outside the classroom was, he said, one of us is going to die. It's either going to be you or me, but one of us is going to die. So it was to him that was a very serious issue. The issue that...
something that you had said to him?
Yeah.
Oh.
And to me, it was not a terribly significant thing. But I found out later that he had been harboring ill feelings toward me for a long time that had not been evident. But some of the people thought that was politically motivated, that it was because of the political situation. I don't think that it was. Nothing that the person said ever indicated to me that there was any political motivation for it. I will point out too that after I was assaulted, we came into this classroom where the girls are staying now, and Lo Quipman, who was the other teacher, and I had prayer. And after that, I can't say that the Lord spoke to me, but just that I felt I was not to call in the police, which was the logical thing to do in that situation, was to call the police and have him arrested for assault. But I just felt that was not what I was supposed to do. And without having any reason or intellectual motivation for that was what I felt. And the thing that I can say today is that I harbor no ill feelings toward the guy who did it, and he doesn't toward me either. I see him fairly regularly now, and I've how should I say, been in quite close contact with him quite a lot since then. And I think that if I had called the police in, that would not have been the result of that situation. But anyway, the result was that I resigned as principal of the school, which I was serving as. My dad had retired by that stage. And Floyd Stam, who was a missionary in Durban, he agreed then to look after the school for the next year. By the time the year was over, he felt that the situation was one that could not be maintained, and so he said that the school needed to close.
What year was that?
That was 1993. In fact, he left South Africa by the end of 1993. Floyd Stam did. And he really felt that the situation could not be salvaged. And 1994, we still had 2 students that had not completed their second year of study, which they wanted to do. And so Lo Quipman and I then continued to teach through 1994 so that those 2 men could complete their second year of study. And then the school closed. And my wife and I went back to the States and spent 3 years in the States studying there. But the result of that was that the Africans realized that they really needed a training facility. They had nothing here in South Africa, and so they then began to request that there would be a new school opened in South Africa, and for the Church of Christ, for our group. And the result of that was that in 1997, a school opened in Kimberley. It's called the South African Bible Institute. and it still is a school sponsored by the Churches of Christ, and it continues to function. Interestingly to me, in the very place where the school started in the beginning, which was Kimberley. In fact, in Galashue, the township that is on the edge of Kimberley, the original school was kind of on the border of the township, but now it's out in Beaconsfield, but there's still the greater Kimberley area. So that's what has happened to the school. The result was that when my wife and I came back to South Africa, then we began to look for a new ministry, and both of us being involved in education, we looked for some kind of ministry in education. And I started out by teaching grade 12 biblical studies in high school. Now this is a high school subject, not, shall we say, not a theological college situation, but they do teach biblical studies at Umtwanam Gamizizwe High School. So I offered to teach grade 12 biblical studies, and I found that that really didn't work out very well. The people were set in their ways as far as their studies were concerned. They were used to receiving notes written out by the teacher that they would learn and memorize and then repeat back in the exams, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. And so at the end of that year, I made the decision I would not go back into that kind of situation. Carol and I decided we needed to work with younger people. So we tried teaching grade 9 English. By that time we knew the English teacher, and so we could do that. And we taught English, but again, there was a transitional situation at the high school that aggravated what was already a bad situation there. And my wife and I spent most of our time simply fighting to control the class, which really was a very unhappy working type environment. And so by the end of that year, we decided, well, that wasn't what we wanted to do either. But that was 1999, and toward the end of the year, 6 students came, and they said that they wanted to learn English. They were in grade 11, and the English teacher came to us and asked us if we'd be willing to teach them. And I said yes. I debated on whether I dared ask them, but the thing I wanted to do was I wanted to get away from the high school campus over there. And so I eventually asked them, would they be willing to come to Umzumbi Bible Institute, and we would teach them in the afternoons after school. And they agreed to do that. And so they started coming over every Tuesday afternoon. We would give them further instruction in English. Oh, I should mention, I asked them why they wanted to study English, and the answer that I expected was so that they could pass their English exams at the end of the year. Well, I found out that wasn't why they said. They said they wanted to learn English so that they could get jobs. And the South Africans all know that it's hard to get jobs here in South Africa. The situation certainly isn't what most Americans experience, where I presume most of you have had some kind of paying job before you've got this far in high school even. But so we agreed to teach them, and at the same time used it as an opportunity to tell them about Jesus Christ as well. And so that was where our tutoring program began. Joel, you met Edwin this afternoon. After the first, I don't know if it was at the second week or the second class that we held, or the third one, but anyway, I told them that if they knew of 2 other people who wanted to join them, that they could bring 2 others along, because I wanted to keep it to a small group, but I felt that we could handle 8. And so the person who came as the next 2 after the first 6, Edwin was one of those 2. And so he's been with us since the end of 1999. And now he graduated from high school last year. Yes?
So from 1994 to 1999, this was the Bible school was closed?
Yeah. And there was nothing done here. The only thing that they had was a creche that operated, but that was all. The school sat empty. And so actually that's another thing that you people need to appreciate. You know, when you look at the campus now, you can see that the buildings are old. Many of them have been neglected, and the reason has been that, you know, we have not had use for the buildings except these 2. They have been in use off and on over those years. But so we've tried to maintain these 2 buildings, but the rest of the campus the creche is operated from that classroom where the boys are as well. And they've continued to operate. Yeah, if this were during the school year, they would be in operation as well. Sorry, for the Americans, creche is a daycare center. Okay, so that's been the situation that has developed, and then we've continued to do tutoring through the school here. Cedric, or Mondley, if you want to call him by his Zulu name, he joined our group last year. Sorry, this is 2003 now, and so he's just started receiving tutoring from us as well, and we hope that he'll come back next year as well, or this year as well. This year's next year's. Okay, so I hope that explains a little bit about why this school is here and how it's developed and why it no longer functions as a resident Bible school like it used to, but why we do have the facilities that we do here. Yeah.
Are there plans to start up another Bible school here, or you plan to continue?
No. In fact, the one thing, because this is a parochial school, it's sponsored and supported by one church, one faith group, if I can call it that. I felt very strongly when the school closed that we did not want to have any competition and for training facilities here in South Africa. And so I actually told the continuation committee that developed a new school in Kimberley, I told them, I said, I would not establish any school as long as there were plans for another school in South Africa, that I would not try and resurrect this. And we've actually had a number of the church leaders from KwaZulu-Natal who have felt very strongly about losing the school, that they want the school to be reopened. In fact, there's still a movement among the leaders to try and work out how they can develop the school as a regional facility for the church. Yeah. And basically their concept is that it needs to be a training facility. They don't speak to me about that anymore because they know how I feel about it. But I can tell from the things that they're suggesting that that's what's in their minds. Yeah. But the churches in KwaZulu-Natal felt that they suffered a severe loss when the school was moved to, well, it wasn't moved because this really was a totally different entity in Kimberley, but they felt that it was a very severe loss to them here. Yeah.
How many students did you hold here while the school was open?
Typically we had from 8 to 12. It was a very small school. At one time we got up to about 20, but that really was unmanageable in the circumstances. We didn't have adequate facilities for that many, and we had some problem students in that group as well, which aggravated the situation quite a lot. But I always felt that 16 was optimal, but we very seldom had 16.
And then how many people are you teaching now at the moment?
In the tutoring program?
Yeah.
Well, this past year we had very few because we just started up after we came back from the States. But typically let's see, in 2001, we probably had about 16 coming fairly regularly. We had a bigger group than that, but they didn't, see, this is entirely voluntary. So we didn't have 100% attendance all the time, which was very different from the first year. In 1999, we had all the students here every week and a great deal of enthusiasm, which was quite amazing to me. But by 2002, we had up to 24 that were coming quite regularly when we had 3 classes, because we did English on Tuesday. My wife taught mathematics on Thursday, and then by their request, I had biblical studies students from grade 12 coming on Friday, because that was the only day that they were free in the afternoon. And now that group actually grew through the years. The rest of the groups, they all diminished through the year, but the biblical studies group grew.
You're still teaching biblical studies then?
I will, as long as there's a need for it. The biblical studies program, it is a high school class, so it is not a for most of the students, this is not an important spiritual experience. They learn the material that they're required to learn. But even Edwin, who spent more time in our instruction than anyone else, said that he doesn't know as much about the Bible as he ought to know, because the biblical studies course didn't teach him that, and a lot of what he learned, of course, he picked up here anyway. But as long as it's taught over at this school, it gives me a good opportunity to emphasize the fact that their real textbook ought to be the Bible, that the Bible does provide important teaching for them, and it isn't just a case of learning that there are 3 synoptic gospels, and that Jesus performed miracles, and that Jesus taught parables and so on. There's a lot more to it than that. Yeah.
And then do the students have to pay for their tuition?
No.
Or is it a volunteer?
This has been entirely voluntary, and it's been free. Now, when we were in the States this last time, we got computers, and we plan to teach computers this year, a kind of an introductory course, because many of the students have had no contact with computers. Cedric, have you ever typed at a computer, or have you ever even switched the computer on? So what we'd like to do is kind of provide a bridging situation where if they want to take computer courses, which by the way Edwin does now, that we can provide a background for them that would at least begin to put them on an equal footing with other students that would be going into that, because students from Port Jefferson High School, they've been exposed, well, as you know, because you're one of them, but we're one of them. Have you finished now? Yeah. That you had a fair amount of exposure to computers at school, but out here they have one computer, and that's in the school office.
So do you get sponsorship from churches?
Yes, we get sponsorship from a number of churches in the United States. I don't know, my wife would be able to tell you how many that we actually have that support us regularly, but it's probably around 20, and one of which, by the way, is Valley Christian Church. So. There we are. Yeah. So, the comment that was made, now some of you have been over at the bed and breakfast. Nozizwe was the first wedding that my father performed that would have been illegal under the apartheid regime. She married Jeremy Rutledge, who, as you know, is white, and the wedding was held here, and for me it was an interesting situation. The people came here, and one of the comments that they kept making was, "This is such a beautiful place out here. You have grass. If you go to the primary school and the high school here, you'll find that they literally do not have any lawns. So this, at least in this area, this school is very unusual. In fact, in terms of the high schools in this community as a whole, even this would be unusual. But people made a lot of comments about that, and they commented that they would like to come back and visit again. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is to maintain the lawns out here, because that is an unusual feature of this as a facility. And from seeing you guys, I presume that you appreciate the grass out here as well.
And then do you hold church services on Sundays or?
Yeah. So that's a regular use that continued from the time that this school was first established here in they first started holding services here in 1959. Now, when the school moved out, the congregation took a severe beating, and it decreased in numbers significantly, so the group is quite small now.
And do you teach, or
No.
do someone else teach?
No, other people do. I come occasionally and do that. George Jatla is the official minister here. He has a lot of work responsibilities. I know that he's not here every week, but he normally preaches here. Sometimes, if I'm not, preaching in somewhere else in KwaZulu-Natal, then I'll preach here as well. I know one thing, that whenever I come out here, I will be asked to preach. That's the one thing that has sort of become a law here. But I don't preach regularly here. But that's one of the reasons why we've been involved in the outreach to high school students, because we felt that it was a means of bringing young people into the church as well. And I will admit that we've not been as successful at that as I would have liked to have been. But I still feel it's a very important outreach.
What? I got no head gel.
We are marching, marching away. We are marching, marching, marching. We are marching, marching away.
March away.
We are marching, marching, marching. We are marching, marching away. We are marching, marching, marching. We are marching, marching away.
It was more about, it was in a really funky looking space clothes that looked like old,
Okay, we ready? Yeah. Just need to get them lined up and bring them up.
Should we get them? Where are we getting them? On the day or
Right here.
On first day and the second day, I
Okay, grade 3 and grade 4.
Buketo, we don't have to be Crash first day and the second day is an me now. Grade 3 and 4. What grade are you? Crash first day and the second day. Manula is Manula was snake. Manula is when
Grade 3 and grade 4. What grade are you guys?
grade 5, 6, and 7.
What's that?
We need to line them up behind each other as well. So small grades and one long line. Yeah.
Okay, let the little ones go first and we'll follow on. What are we singing?
Okay, well, everybody, I want to be a sheep. I just want to be a sheep. I just want to be a sheep. Come follow me. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. I just want to be a sheep. This way. I want to be a Pharisee. 'Cause then I
I don't want to be a Pharisee. I just want to be a sheep. I just want to be a sheep. I praise the Lord. Sheep, ba 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 ba. I just wanna be a sheep, ba 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 ba. I praise the Lord, my soul to keep. I just wanna be a sheep, ba 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 ba.
I don't wanna be a goat.
No, 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 no. I don't wanna be a goat,
No, 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 no.
'cause
The goat ain't got no hope. Yeah. I don't wanna be a goat. No, 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 no. I just wanna be a sheep. Ba 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 ba. I just wanna be a sheep. Ba 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 ba. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. I just wanna be a sheep. Ba 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 ba.
Move, Malik. Move.
The bright and morning star makes no difference what they say.
They count on my knees and pray. They serve invitation, Jesus comes. He's my rock, my sword, my shield. He's always in the
of the valley, the bright and morning star makes no difference what they say. I get down on my knees and pray. Servants every day till Jesus comes.
my sword, my shield. He's the wheel in the middle of the wheel.
The lily of the valley, the bright and morning star makes no difference what they say.
Yes, you'll get one photo.
Yeah, so the sun is so bad. But she said, no, no, but the is so.
We'll do one and bring it down.
Straight into? Okay, so man. Yes, it's only full.
and rolled a huge rock over the hole. Day 1. Day 2. And on the third day, an angel of the Lord came and rolled the huge rock away. And the tomb was empty. Jesus was gone. And Jesus was alive.
Make disciples of all men, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And remember this, I am with you always, even to the end of the time.
I'm King Goodwill Makatini Postman. I bring post.
If we could have some leaders come up and help to pass them.
I'll take it.
Anele?
Slag.
Where's Anele?
Yeah.
Ja, Pili. Absent. Mackendar. Upi Loren, Loren.
Mac.
He's not Mac. Who's Mac? Some strange little man.
Shannon.
What's it? I had my subject coming today. We'll post you.
Post me. Send me away.
You will be posted by the body till death.
Don't have any names. Okay, if they don't have any names.
Sorry.